Call a meeting to order. I want to welcome everybody here. We do have a number of items on the agenda today, and but first I'm going to ask Councillor Zwaagstra to bring opening, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lately I've been reading a book by Dr. Everett Piper. The book is called Not a Daycare, The Devastating Consequences of Abandoning Truth. Dr. Piper is the president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University, and he wrote a blog post a couple of years ago that kind of became the thing that led to this book. And so I want to read from the blog post that he wrote, and he's talking about what happens all too often in universities. This past week, I actually had a student come forward after a university chapel service and complain because he felt victimized by a sermon on the topic of 1 Corinthians 13. It appears this young scholar felt offended because a homily on love made him feel bad for not showing love. In his mind, the speaker was wrong for making him and his peers feel uncomfortable. I'm not making this up. Our culture has actually taught students to be this self-absorbed and narcissistic. Anytime their feelings are hurt, they are the victims. Anyone who dares to challenge them and thus makes them feel bad about themselves is a hater, a bigot, an oppressor, and a victimizer. Well, I have a message for this young man and all others who care to listen. That feeling of discomfort you have after listening to a sermon is called a conscience. An altar call is supposed to make you feel bad. It is supposed to make you feel guilty. The goal of many a good sermon is to get you to confess your sins, not coddle you in your selfishness. The primary objective of the church and the Christian faith is your confession, not your self-actualization. So here's my advice. If you want the chaplain to tell you you're a victim rather than tell you that you need virtue, this may not be the university you're looking for. If you want to complain about a sermon that makes you feel less than loving for not showing love, this might be the wrong place. If you're more interested in playing the hater card than you are in confessing your own hate, if you want to arrogantly lecture rather than humbly learn, if you don't want to feel guilt in your soul when you are guilty of sin, if you want to be enabled rather than confronted, there are many universities across the land that will give you exactly what you want, but this university isn't one of them. At this university, we teach you to be selfless rather than self-centered. We are more interested in you practicing personal forgiveness than political revenge. We want you to model interpersonal reconciliation rather than foment personal conflict. We believe the content of your character is more important than the color of your skin. We don't believe that you have been victimized every time you feel guilty, and we don't issue trigger warnings before altar calls. Our university is not a safe place, but rather a place to learn that life isn't about you, but about others, that the bad feeling you have while listening to a sermon is called guilt, that the way to address it is to repent of everything that's wrong with you rather than blame others for everything that's wrong with them. This is a place where you will quickly learn that you need to grow up. This is not a daycare. This is a university. So that was the blog post that he wrote, and it went viral. He ended up being interviewed on quite a few different shows, and he ended up expanding this into a book. And it's an interesting book because he pulls out many examples where, in far too many cases, we focus on people's feelings as opposed to objective reality, as opposed to the reality that that sometimes we need to look at ourselves rather than blame everyone else for our problems. And I would extend that a little bit farther and just raise the question, this is for all of us, myself included, that when we feel offended at what someone else says, when someone else causes us offense, when we've been challenged in what we think, we should take a step back and ask ourselves the question, is it really the case that the other person has done something wrong and how they've offended me? Or am I perhaps the one who needs to change? Am I perhaps the one that has been needlessly offended? So I like this statement here. This is not a daycare. This is a university. I think that applies in a lot of things in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zwaagstra. We have the agenda in front of us. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Fair, seconded by Councillor Penner. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favour? Carried. We have the minutes in front of us from the special meeting of Council on page 1. You've all had a chance to review those. Can I have a motion, please? Motion to approve. Councillor Siemens, seconded by Councillor Zwaagstra. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favour? Carried. We have the minutes from April 17th on page 2. You've all had a chance to review them. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Councillor Penner, Councillor Funk. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favour? Carried. We have no business arising from the minutes. We will now move to the public hearing It's now 7:35. I'm going to close the council meeting, open the public hearing. This is in regards to the rezoning bylaw 2092 and variation V 2018-03. This is in regards to First Street, a number of street addresses on First Street. Page 4 for council members. Mr. Warkentine, I'll ask you to introduce this, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This public hearing is with respect to two separate files. First of all, zoning bylaw 2092 and also variance file V-2018-03. It is for properties with civic address from 47 through 77 First Street in Steinbach. There are a number of owners for the various number of parcels that are involved with this file. However, the applicant for the rezoning and the variance is 613-5367 Manitoba Inc. and 556-3985 Manitoba Ltd. Purpose of zoning bylaw 2092 is to rezone the properties, the subject properties from RLD, residential low density, to RMD, residential medium density. And purpose of the variance file is to allow a front yard setback of 15 feet, whereas the RMD, residential medium density zone, requires a minimum of 25 feet. The purpose of the applications are that the applicant is proposing to rezone the properties to allow the development of multifamily buildings on the subject parcels. Notices pursuant to the Planning Act have been issued. There is one piece of written correspondence that has been received objecting to zoning bylaw 2092. With your permission, I will explain the background for both of the files. First off, with the land and the rezoning application, as was mentioned, it is currently zoned residential low density with the application to amend to residential medium density. The surrounding properties on First Street are generally older single-family homes on larger lots, with the majority of the parcels on the street zoned residential low density. If council proceeds with the approval process, it should be subject to the applicant entering into a development agreement and also the file being subject to the city's infill development policy. Recommendation from administration for zoning bylaw 2092 is that council proceed to give that file second reading subject to the execution of a development agreement. Then with respect to the rezoning application, the developer is requesting a reduction of the front yard setback in connection with this proposed multifamily development. Again, as mentioned, this proposal is considered infill development and as such is subject to further review through the city's infill development policy. With respect to this front yard setback, there are 6 properties that are being proposed to be consolidated under this plan. And it results in the overall area covering approximately 2 acres in size and spanning nearly 400 feet of frontage on First Street. The requested reduction in the front yard setback appears that it would result in a significant change to the neighborhood, and therefore the recommendation from administration is that council deny the application for the front yard variance. Further, depending on the decision process that council chooses for the rezoning, the council decision is recommended to be deferred until after third reading of zoning bylaw 2092 has been considered.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Warkentine. Before we get to anyone objections or have any questions, we do have the applicant here today. Is that correct? If the applicant would like to make a presentation, you're free to do so. But first, I'll get you to state your name and your address, and then we will turn it over to you to make a presentation to us. And please direct everything through the chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Luke Wiebe. I am a resident of Steinbach, have been my whole life. I live on 30017 36E, I guess technically arm of the brokery, but I've been a resident of Steinbach ever since I was 1 year old. I am a realtor and developer with Royal LePage in Steinbach. I have purchased, together with my mother, Kathy Wiebe, who's been in the real estate business here about 30 years, these 6 properties, even though the names are, a few of them still are in titles, different names. It is one applicant. We are the ones that will be doing the whole project. It won't be multiple little projects, so that's important to note.
Thank you.
Yep. I printed, I know we're just going for rezoning here at the time, but I did want to give everybody an idea and concept that we're already building in Niverville, Manitoba right now. They're very excited about it there. It's, we're not looking to do affordable, cheap real estate. That's not who we are. We recently developed an old 1912 abandoned brick church in Roland, Manitoba. We put them on the map again. We had 1,000 people at the open house there. Which is no joke, 1,000 people during their pumpkin fair, which is amazing. What we do is, and want to do here, is we want to really rejuvenate downtown Steinbach. So we're removing, I have a bunch of these, oops, sorry, just in case anybody would like one. You can put that over there, thanks. Basically just showing you, you can take a drive down First Street, any of you that haven't, but a bunch of old rundown houses that we want to get rid of, obviously, and build some beautiful new real estate there. There is a demand as a realtor. I understand the demand in the community. In the last 5 years, we have had a great demand for affordable rentals downtown, as well as new condos and homes. And the concept we have here is a little bit different than an apartment-style building. That's why we feel it's a lot more appealing. We still have more green space. We have over 12,000 square foot of common green space planned in the development. It could actually be a little bit more, but I'm just basing it off of the current plan that we are hoping to achieve. And the main thing I would like to say about the variance that we're requesting is several of the houses on the street, including some of the ones that we own, already have a setback of less than what today's standards are. So the houses are closer to the street already, a lot of them. And also the side yard, which is technically the backyard of these townhouses, the side yard requirements with the zoning, the City of Steinbach zoning requirement is a minimum of 4 foot, which you'll see on many multifamily projects. We don't like that. We know that it's been done before. We've set our plan at 15 feet, and we will have no problem continuing to do that. So the neighbors on both sides of these properties, have actually talked to a bunch of people on the whole street and left nice detailed map drawings and notes with every house on that street and a few others nearby. Not one person had anything negative to say about it. They were really excited that a lot of these old homes would be removed. And we feel that fencing in a nice, beautiful subdivision in that area will be an awesome addition to real estate in Steinbach. And infill housing is such a nice thing because you're getting rid of old homes that are not being taken care of. I would also like to add that it's obvious based on the addresses put up on the screen there that some of these homes we haven't owned for many years, and some of them we don't even have possession of yet. So some of the worst ones that have been just sitting empty, there's one in particular that's not us that have done that. We bought the house to try to include it in our development. So we haven't let homes get like this, and now we're coming to the table. We've actually bought homes that were as rentals with risk of not ever knowing if this would ever be feasible. So essentially we put together this 6 lot proposal, and we have people on either side that are wanting to sell to us in the future, which we would obviously love to do one day if it works, right? But so yeah, I'm open to questions. Anyone that has any questions for me? Yes.
Thank you. There may be questions for you, but first we'll go through the objections, and then we might call you back for.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, is there anyone here who has any questions or has an objection to either the variation or the rezoning aspect? I see a hand. Please take the podium. That's you, yeah. Take the podium, state your name and your address, and then I'll give you a few minutes.
Okay, my name is Teresa Burgess. I live at 56 Donald. Now, this may seem odd that we don't even live on First Street. However, we most certainly would be affected by this development. I'm here with my husband, Jamie. We are here as property owners on Donald Avenue and here for a second time to object to the rezoning of this area. While we may not live on First Street, we will most certainly be affected by this development. We would like to put this in perspective. The impact of rezoning these 6 properties will have on the entire neighborhood. According to the newspaper article, and I be happy if you can correct me on this. Phase 1 would add 36 housing units where there are currently 3.
It's 18 townhouses.
Sorry, sorry. You'll have to direct everything
I'm
towards.
sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Just
Okay.
please direct everything towards the chair, and then after we'll have those
Okay,
dealt with.
so I will go based on the information from
Yeah.
the posting. In Phase 1, the addition of 36 housing units where there are currently 3 is an increase of 1,200%. By the time Phase 2 is complete, the city would be allowing this development to essentially insert the entire neighborhood that is currently bordered by First Street, Westdale, to Ellis, Ellis to Giesbrecht, and Giesbrecht back up to First Street. You would essentially be fitting that entire neighborhood into these 6 lots. Consider this. At a minimum, an average residence has a 3-piece bathroom, a kitchen sink, dishwasher, washer, and laundry sink. This would be 7 fixtures per resident, demanding water and feeding the sewer system. With 36 units times 2 phases, you are increasing the pressure on the existing infrastructure by having 504 fixtures accessing infrastructure instead of 42. We have seen major sewer backup and flooding in our neighborhood in the past. What impact is this additional pressure and demand going to have on the existing infrastructure and the houses in the neighborhood? Presumably, these townhouses will attract families with children. Has consideration been given to the additional pressure this development would put on the schools in the area? Most homes have 2 vehicles. Where you currently may have 12 vehicles attached to 6 lots, you would be adding potentially an additional 132 vehicles to this short stretch of residential street, not including any visitor traffic or existing through traffic. Not only will this development increase traffic on a 1-block stretch of First Street, it will impact traffic flows through the Giesbrecht and 52 intersection and down the street to the 1st and 12 intersections. Both of these areas are prone to flooding during heavy rains, which further complicates traffic flows. Over the years, these intersections have already seen significant increase in traffic as a result of development to the west and southwest, as traffic now flows down Giesbrecht to 52 and shortcuts down to 7-Eleven via Donald. Children like to play on the street. Families walk on these neighborhood streets that have no sidewalks, and in this neighborhood, the development would create further safety concerns for the neighborhood. At first blush, land development proposals such as this appear to be a good idea. However, with all due respect to land developers who wish to grow our community, goodness knows there are sufficient new neighborhoods around Steinbach which are not considered existing neighborhoods and could be planned with the appropriate infrastructure and traffic management to accommodate this density of housing. It would also ensure that people moving into new areas know before they buy that there are apartments, condos, or townhomes in their neighborhood without the worry of having the face of their neighborhood changed down the road. These particular lots are large. They are in an established neighborhood. They would lend themselves to being redeveloped as beautiful homes on large lots. When we purchased our home on Donald 22 years ago, we purchased it with a view to enjoy quiet community living at its best. We intentionally purchased in a neighborhood of single-family homes with generous lots where kids could safely play on the street, families could safely walk, and you could enjoy a quiet evening in your yard. What we see here is a complete disregard for the long-standing quiet calm of an established neighborhood. The proposed rezoning of this block of First Street has already been turned down once. What makes this application for rezoning any different? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to object? So let me be, let's sure we get this clear. So you officially object. I think it was fairly clear. I think it was
I officially object.
very good. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to object or have any questions on this file? Anyone else wishing to object or have any questions? I'll ask one final time. Anyone else wishing to object or have any questions? Seeing none, I'll ask the applicant to come back to the podium, please. And you did hear a few comments in there and also some questions. If you can address those comments, those that you see fit, as well as the question, I think, specifically in regards to number of units that you had initially planned. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for your concern and your questions. I appreciate them fully. I'd start with confirming the townhouses. So it is 18 townhouses, but they do have lower level one-bedroom suites. So 36 suites, yes, but not 36 homes, townhouses, I should say. And yes, certain things here I can't speak to without being part of the city planning as far as sewer and drainage and stuff like that. I can only do on my development what I'm told to. However, I do understand that from my discussions with the city so far, they've confirmed with me, I can be corrected here today, but they were looking, the engineers looking at sewer, the sewer lines that are in that area. Another thing I would say that when you bring in an infill housing into a community, that actually puts less stress on the city's infrastructure in the sense of they're going to have revenue from those properties to actually help continue to build the utilities within the community. When we were in Niverville, they were actually contributing a water line because there's no water line downtown. There's hardly any communities of that size that do not have city water, and we're giving city water now potential to anybody on almost a whole block that we're putting in a water line because there is no water line. So there are a lot of benefits. I'm sure we could just go try to buy a raw piece of land on the outskirts of Steinbach somewhere in a new development, but that's just something that we're not really interested in. We feel that infill housing is a better option because we can actually, if a city can grow, I guess I would say times change. These large lots aren't feasible anymore, hence the houses that are on them have never been replaced. And unfortunately, because the prices of homes went up over the last 20 years so much, people that we've seen in the business are not going to spend 150 to 200,000 plus that we spend on these old dumpy houses to go and build a new house. If that could work, great. We would do it, and we'd happily sell our land for a little profit and just sell them to people who want to build homes, but that doesn't work. So we're also here not looking, at least in the first phase, to do anything three-story. With the zoning that we're requesting, we can technically come and ask for a three-story apartment building. Again, that's not something, we don't want to just cram it in and have it as close to the property lines as possible, so we're definitely not being overly ambitious in that sense. I understand it seems like a lot of units it is, however, other areas in town, even just to the north, I guess, Snap Fitness and all those condos that we would be backing onto already have a good number of units there already. As far as traffic goes, yes, that's always a concern. Due to the way that we're doing our subdivision, it is a private drive. Nobody can just, you have to come in and out, but at a slow speed, obviously. And we're going to fence it in. So our play structure area and dog park that we were planning to build in the first phase are at the far north side, like backing onto Snap Fitness and those buildings on Main Street there. So that's all the kids that are in there that want to play. They're going to go to the end of their community that is furthest from the street. So that is what unless they want to go to a park somewhere, right? Obviously, but every kid has the right in Steinbach to go to any park they want. It's a public park. So the reality is, I understand your concern of that. As far as the value of real estate, when it's nice real estate like this that we're building, it will not lower the value. A lot of people, it's a misconception that if you have old dumpy houses like we have there now compared to brand new, people are used to seeing brand new infill development in every community. It does happen, and it's, like I said, it's a great thing for the community as well. And then the different, what did you mention again that you said how is it different? Well, to my understanding, the past rezoning was one lot on here, not 6. So I could understand a lot more if all the people on the side that were on there, a few of them were heavily objecting it because they lived there and they lived right beside where that application was made. And we're obviously investing a lot more in the city here to tie up this amount of houses and be willing to, do more one day, but yeah, so times change. I realize that it's not everybody loves it, but we're not looking to go and cram in, the cheapest quality real estate just to make a buck. We're looking to build beauty in the community that we are in, and we love this city. So yeah, we want to honor that, and hopefully, yeah, have the blessings of those around us.
Thank you. Now, you have, there might be time for any questions from council, but just you have basically talked about the rezoning. Do you want to add anything more about the variation before?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, the variation, the main reason we requested is because a bunch of the houses on the street are already that close, and some maybe even closer to the street. So we feel it's a very fair request, and we're fencing it in. It is like a side yard. It's technically, yes, I know it's frontage to the street, but it will be acted as a side yard to the townhouses. So there's not a driveway there. There's not, on that portion. And also, the other side, our technical side yards, which are backyards to the townhouses, are less. They're way more, 15 feet instead of 4. So the variation is to give us a little bit more room in the back for that green space to have a park and a dog park for those that have pets, which is something that is non-existent almost in this community. So
Thank you. There might be some questions. I'll ask you to remain at, okay, before we go to council, we'll just get Ms. Burgess to, you have one more question to ask, so you'll have to take the podium.
no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Wiebe. The reason we do the podium is because everything is recorded and videotaped as well. So that is why.
I would like to make one correction. There is a park in the triangle behind the houses on the north side of Donald, and yet we still have children playing on the street on a regular basis. With the developments to the southwest, we have seen such traffic increase on Donald Street, and I cannot imagine what that will mean with that amount of increase on First Street, and by no means does the traffic go slow. Our local police department could make a fast buck sitting on the corner of Donald and Westdale for everybody that blows the stop sign and uses it as a drag strip from Giesbrecht down to 7-Eleven. Thank you.
Thank you.
A couple questions to Ms. Burgess.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Councillor Zwaagstra.
Sorry, Ms. Burgess, could you just clarify, I believe you said 56 Donald. Could we
Yes.
can we get indicated on the map, maybe the city staff could do it, just where your house is, just in relation, just so I can...
It is, if you're coming off First Street onto Donald, we are the second house on the south side.
That house?
And we have a large lot that we have maintained, and there are many other residents in our neighborhood that have done the same.
Okay. And then my second question is, do other residents feel the same way as you? I mean, because at this point, we have one letter of objection from one person on First Street, and then you're here in person. Do other neighbors have these?
I would imagine if we did not have a Jets playoff game, you would have seen many more people here this evening.
A what?
Could I confirm? So what you're saying is you have spoken to a bunch of neighbors and they have specifically said they object to this?
They have objected in the past, and I see no reason why they would not be objecting for the same reasons they did in the first place. And I would be happy to go door to door to everybody in this neighborhood and explain to them what that will mean for our neighborhood.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Burgess? Seeing none, thank you. All right. Mr. Wiebe, there might be a few questions for you. Are there any questions for Mr. Wiebe? Okay, Councillor Penner, you can direct it through me. Okay.
Thank you. Through you. Thank you. You've presented a very nice plan. What I want to ask was in relation to the variance, the front yard variance. If that would be denied tonight, how would that impact? Would you just essentially move your whole project back and that would remove the green space and the dog park?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify what that would mean if that would
Thank you.
not get approved.
Further questions? Councillor Siemens, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In the city engineer report, this area requires 120 parking stalls. And for the 72 dwelling units, or what is the case? That, regardless, part of the parking stalls that have been indicated are in the front of the garage unit.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Concern I have is over the amount of parking stalls attached. How many, you need one and a half stalls per unit?
Yes, so in the first phase here, we have 36 units, and we have 42 outdoor parking stalls with our 18 garage parking stalls, so for a total of 60,
And how many
which
of
is
those?
actually 1.5 plus 10% is the city of Steinbach, right?
And how many of those stalls you have the stall in the garage, and then you have the stall outside of the garage as well?
Yep.
And that's
And
not-
then extra as well, some additional
Yeah.
parking as well.
But the stall in front of the garage, you can't count as a parking stall, right?
I believe we can. It's been done before in Steinbach.
All right, just for clarification,
development.
again, Mr. Workington, I think it's more a question of Mr. Workington than Mr. Wiebe. But any further questions for Mr. Wiebe?
Nope.
No. Thank you. Mr. Zwaagstra, and then we'll maybe ask Mr. Workington to clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Mr. Wiebe, and then I'd like the administration to answer the same question, just so we make sure we're all getting the same information. Mr. Wiebe, you have stated that there are other properties that go as close to 15 feet up to the front. Are you talking about properties other than the 6 that you're proposing to rezone? Are you saying that properties that are immediately nearby
Yeah.
go closer?
Yeah, the one directly to the northwest of us, whatever that is, that one's as close as any of them, maybe even closer. It actually looks like it's almost on the city property line. If you look right above the D there, that one is definitely way past the 25. Any of the newer homes that were built, if you look back at the duplex on the end, that's almost 15 feet. On the furthest above the R there on the corner, that's a newer duplex that was built, so that might have even been at 20 feet, but I think it's probably 25. I wouldn't be able to confirm that one. But if you look at the one, like I said, above the D, that one's looks like it's almost right on the city.
And then if we could get Mr. Workington to specific, because one of the reasons for recommending denial is because of consistency with the street. Could I get administration to respond and comment?
All right, Mr. Workington, two questions for you. Number one is there's a question in regards to parking and what the norm is. Now, obviously, we know that the details of the plan will obviously still be worked through the development agreement, but there will be a requirement to have the number of parking stalls, and there was a question in regards to parking stalls in front of garages and whether those are included or not. Do you have any comment at this time?
Yes, with respect to that comment, I will refer you to the report prepared by the city engineer, found on page 7. It's in the section entitled Property Access. And it is the first paragraph. The comments from the city engineer with respect to the parking stalls is that 36 of the outdoor stalls claimed as parking spaces are in front of the garage, thus blocking access. These 36 stalls in front of the garages cannot be considered parking spaces, and thus the plan will be short by that amount.
Thank you. Obviously, the details of the future plan and all those will be part of the development agreement?
It's part of the development agreement as well as the overall required site plan, which is subject to an administrative review.
Okay, thank you. Further questions thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, for Mr. Workington. With the amount of doors that would be on this lot, would it be recommended to put sidewalks there, and what would the sidewalk dynamic be if this variance was approved? Are we going to be sidewalk against the building?
As far as the site plan that Mr. Wiebe has provided, it does not, to my knowledge, indicate the location of the public sidewalk, although I'll just have a quick look. But at this point, the public sidewalk on First Street is on the northeast side of First Street, which would be on the same side of the street as Mr. Wiebe's proposed development. I can't comment until we have a confirmed site plan as to what the impact could be.
All right, you have one further supplementary?
I'm just wondering whether it would be advisable for us to get a site plan before we make a decision on something like that, not having all the information. Mr. Workington, maybe.
Okay. Mr. Wiebe, you have a comment on that?
I was just going to say, I've submitted the site plan, so it would be just a matter of confirming the location of the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. So administration is working on that with that site plan as we speak. So there is a supplementary question that I didn't address back to you, and that was the 15-foot frontage, or the request for the 15 feet, and the statement that other homes along that area are less than the 25 required. Do you have any information on that, Mr. Workentine?
Just from general observation, it does appear that some of the properties that are subject to Mr. Weeb's application do appear to be or have been constructed closer to the street than is what the city currently has as its required setbacks. However, for all other properties in the vicinity that are not subject to the application, they all appear to be at least within the required setback of 25 feet, and many of them exceed the required setback.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from council? Seeing none, you can have the last 30-second words if you choose, or you can say thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it very, very much. Have a great rest of your evening. Go Jets, go.
Thank you. I will now close the public hearing in regards to both the variation and the rezoning. Council, we will first deal with the rezoning. How would you like to proceed? Councillor Penner?
Move to approve.
Move to approve, subject to a development agreement.
Subject to a development agreement.
And also subject to the infill development policy, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Zwaagstra, go ahead.
Thank you. I really like this plan. I think it's a good plan. One of the reasons is different from the previous application is that this plan includes 6 lots, can actually do a nice development, which is what was presented to us. Prior to that, I believe the plan that was presented to us was 1 lot, maybe 2, being developed into a long, narrow infill, I guess, apartment, 3 stories. It was a totally different plan, and this one makes much more sense. One thing about downtown areas is the philosophy in general, when it comes to cities and downtown cores, is to increase density in the downtown, to keep downtowns vibrant. To give more access for people to a walking lifestyle versus a vehicle lifestyle. So in terms of increasing the density in a residential area like this, an older neighborhood, this fits actually well with the overall philosophy of city development. In addition, there's the Snap Fitness, the apartments, I guess, besides Snap Fitness there's numerous medium density that it would back onto, which makes sense as well. So yeah, I think this is a great plan for the area, and I'll leave it with that.
Thank you. Councillor Zwaagstra?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will second the motion. I think that we have a number of cases where there's a request to increase density in a neighborhood, and we look at them on a case-by-case basis, and sometimes it makes sense to allow the rezoning, and sometimes not. And in this case here, we have 6 lots where we have a plan that has been put together, where there's been made an effort to communicate with neighbors and address any concerns. I appreciate the fact that there's the effort in terms of to have a property that doesn't go 3 stories and and it blatantly doesn't fit in. In terms of some of the concerns been raised, I understand there's always concerns regarding change. I will just quote from the city engineer's report, because there was a specific concern raised in regards to water and sewer and all that, and the engineer's report is pretty clear. As with all developments, it says the developer will be responsible for all costs associated with any sewer service improvements, as well as formally abandoning any existing sewer services that are not repurposed for these lots. In other words, what that means is that if there is a change in regards to the sewer requirement, that's on the developer to pay. The developer has to pay for any upgrades that may be necessary in regards to sewer. And so if this does have it does have an impact to the degree that upgrades have to happen, the developer has to pay. That is the city policy, and that's something that we expect. And I understand, in terms of concerns about traffic, but those are concerns you could raise about any additional density. By that reasoning, then we would never allow increased density in any established neighborhood. And we clearly have seen many examples where it has been positive for a neighborhood. So there's obviously details that need to be worked out in a development agreement, and that's why this is only second reading at this time. There are issues, there's some questions in terms of the exact parking and some other placements, but that can be dealt with at a later point. As far as the concept, in terms of the question of the rezoning itself, I think it's a reasonable use of the property.
Thank you. Councillor Siemens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also will vote in favor of this, of the motion as presented. And just to add a number of comments, For me, this is a good area to have multifamily residential area because this also creates a buffer between a very busy highway and the single-family development across the street and to the south. So I think this is part of it. Also, it lends itself because of the large lots that you can do more with those lots, as earlier alluded to. But it's also one of the things, having worked in the industrial areas to the north, this is within walking distance. There's a family then can move in to the employees, potential employees can move into this area and be within walking distance of their workplaces. I think that's important as well for me. So I do vote in favor of this.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Fair.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'm assuming that this is only a motion to rezone from our low density to medium density, right?
Correct.
So the fact that the parking gauge isn't being met, that's going to be addressed in the development agreement. Am I correct with that?
That's correct, because there's no variation being asked for, yeah.
Yeah, so this is basically, some of the things we've talked about are really not quite as relevant, right? So, but yeah, I can support changing it to R&D.
Thank you. Further discussion? Anything in closing?
No, I'll just mention that I appreciate that the developer talked to the neighbors in advance, gave them the heads up, gave them the opportunity to respond and express their concerns. I think the height has been respectful. Instead of going 3 stories, going 2 stories, that fits well into the neighborhood. Overall, I think this will be a very positive improvement to the area.
Thank you. Council, obviously we've heard from the developer here today. He's done a lot of research, he's talked to the neighborhood, and that's appropriate. We've also heard from a concerned resident, and we have information from a concerned resident, Ms. Miller, in regards to some of the concerns. Obviously, we do know that there's some planning involved when it comes to in our engineering department, making sure there's adequate infrastructure in place. That's also the developer's responsibility to pay for that, and so obviously, we're going to see infill and we're going to see increased density, which is part of the official community plan and our desire for our community. So look forward to seeing this move forward. I'll call for the question. All those in favor of second reading? Thank you. Does council wish to deal with the variation today, or I know administration has suggested that we wait till third reading before we deal with the variation. How would you like to proceed? Pardon me?
I would say we should wait because we need that additional info.
Okay, thank you. Is there general consensus we wait then? Okay, thank you. We'll wait on that variation till third reading, and then we'll ask administration and send this to the municipal board. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Does not dealing with the variation today impact the ability to the development agreement in terms of planning what's going on the site and how that will?
Mr. Workentine, the question that we have here is whether not dealing with a variation today is a detriment to the work that you have to do with the developer at this time.
Perhaps at this point, if council is not prepared to make a decision, the developer may have to plan for 2 options, one with the variance being approved and one without. Perhaps if council does proceed to make a decision today, then it does provide certainty for the developer.
My recommendation would be to deal with it today because that just, it kind of handcuffs what the developer.
Would you like to make a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the variance.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder? Councillor Zwaagstra. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. As was presented to us, there's 2 reasons why I support this variance. First of all, I appreciate that this development, they want to have the green space in back as well as the dog park in back. And by allowing this variance, it allows the space to do that at the, I'll say, rear yard, even though I know it's kind of the back side yard. Secondly, I believe it fits into the neighborhood because there's already homes there that are close to the street, more than what we would allow now if they were being built. But I don't think it'll be out of character with the home. So for those 2 reasons, I support the variance.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Zwaagstra, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question, obviously we want to make sure that any new property fits into the existing character of a neighborhood. And I know that there's a recommendation from administration to deny on that basis. However, there's been evidence presented, and I haven't really heard that contradicted, that there are other properties right along First Street that are closer than the 25 feet already. And plus, among the properties that are being rezoned, there are some of those that are already up to about the 15 feet. And so, to a significant degree, we're allowing the property, the new development, to go to the same length of the street as some of the existing properties already do along that side. So it's hard for me to see how it would have a major impact in terms of the character of the neighborhood when there are already other properties that go up to the 15 feet, including some of the ones that are part of the rezoning that are already there. So, so for that reason, I don't see a compelling great reason to deny the variance, so I'll vote in favor.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Fair. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if the information I got was correct, I understand that the houses are not, there's none in the neighborhood that are 25 or less than 25 feet now. Is that correct, Mr. Worthington?
As I mentioned, there is one that is not within the proposed development area that I'm aware of that is closer than the required 25-foot setback. And there are a few within the proposed development area that are presently within or closer to the street than the required 25-foot setback. However, all other properties, to my knowledge, meet or exceed the front yard setback requirement.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Fair?
It does.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Penner.
Yes, I will not vote in favor of the variance. And although it is easy to assume that 15 feet would work, I think if we really want to follow the reason we have a policy for infill is for the neighborhood, and that does not mean just the one side of the street. The entire street is the neighborhood, both that side and the other side. So if we want to encourage infill and if we want it to fit the neighborhood and have the least impact, I think it would be better to have a 25-foot requirement as opposed to 15. That would allow for trees, sidewalks, whatever is necessary to allow it to blend well into the neighborhood.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Siemens.
I will also vote against the motion on the basis that these are large lots. I think part of our infill policy is that it's a 25-foot requirement. I would suggest we stay with that. There will be a lot of those homes turning over the next number of years. I'm pretty sure anyways with the age of those homes in that area. So for some consistency moving forward, I would say that we should keep it at 25.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Fair.
Yes, Mr. Fair. I also will not support the motion because I feel that every time when we get so many of these variances and water always is a problem. And seeing I serve on the St. Rat River Conservation District, we know that when we put asphalt down, houses down, streets down, it takes up the saturation of the water. And every time that we do a variance and we put bigger buildings on there, I think it affects the water flow in the city. And so I'm concerned about that. And I think that my positions on a lot of these things are probably going to take that dynamic going forward. So I don't think I would support it. And not only that, I think that they're going to have a hard time getting the parking lot, parking spaces required with the changes with the garages not being part of that. So.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion?
Mr. Worthington.
Mr. Worthington, okay.
Perhaps just one comment before council deals with the decision. I would recommend that as the motion on the floor is to approve, I would like to add that it would be subject to the third and final reading and approval of zoning bylaw 2092.
Thank you. That can be agreed to. Okay, thank you. Councillor Zwaagstra.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Just to respond to a point that was made by Councillor Fair, our staff do not sign off on development agreements if it's going to cause, direct flooding in a neighborhood, if it's going to impact these things. That's why we have the development agreements. So the issue, that is not the issue before us. The question is simply whether, in this particular case, we're willing to allow it to go up to 15 feet up at the front. And again, I hear mixed evidence here. There are some properties that are at the 25 feet, some properties that are closer. When you have several properties within the thing already that are already closer, you already have that impact. So it's not a huge change when you already have that currently existing. And that's why, as far as variances go, This one's a lot smaller than a lot of the other ones we deal with because of the fact that a lot of the impact is already there.
All right, further comments, Councillor Funk and then Councillor Fair.
Yes, I'd just like to, in further comments to Councillor Fair's statement, when the developer was asked by Councillor Penner what they would do if they don't get the variance, he said merely they would move things back. So in my opinion, what happens now is they lose their green space, they lose their dog park, they lose their playground. So for me now, it becomes a quality of life issue for the tenants. So that's why I'm going to support the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fair.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In response to Councillor Zwaagstra, it's very hard to explain it to somebody that has had a considerable amount of water in their basement when we've had flooding events where the properties were not able to carry the water. And I know my kids were victims of that, so I won't need to be convinced of that. So.
Thank you. Anything sorry, Councillor Penner, excuse me.
Yes, just in response to Councillor Funk's comments about the green space, I think there still is a requirement for a 25-yard setback. So there still would be green space. There would still be room for park and dogs, and as in a normal home.
Thank you. Anything in closing?
Nothing at closing.
No. Council, obviously, we see in front of us that there's a request for a variation subject to third reading. This normally variation requests come because there's a uniqueness to a lot. Right now, this is a rezoning to a higher density, and there isn't necessarily a uniqueness to this. This is a rectangular lot, or a number of rectangular lots, and so this is merely really to add additional units on when it comes to the variation. And so one of the other aspects to this too is that there is an infill development policy which will be looking at how this fits into the neighborhood, whether it's setbacks, whether it's other aspects. And so that infill policy will partly talk about exactly those type of things. And so by giving the variation, we may usurp that infill policy. So I'm not prepared to support the variation at this time. Call for the question. All those in favor of approval? Opposed? All right, it is defeated. So this will now move to the municipal board, or there will be additional, sorry, let me be clear. There will be additional notices given out to the two official objectors, and they will have a further opportunity to object. If that is the case, then this will move to the municipal board. And then after that, we will then deal with it appropriately after that. So thank you, if that's clear. Council, that was a fairly lengthy discussion. We do have to get back to our agenda. And I know we are behind the time, and so I do want to apologize to our two delegations. But we have 8A, we have Mr. Kowalson from Stars Ambulance, and we want to give you some time to speak to us here today. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a PowerPoint that we sent, and I think we're just getting some assistance getting it up.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you very, very much for allowing us the opportunity to make a brief presentation tonight. My name is Michael Kowalson, and I do stakeholder and community outreach for STARS, and I'm here with my colleague Grant Terrian, who's our provincial director. We do have a bit of a PowerPoint that we would like to share with you, and Grant is going to give you a little bit of information about our history and our operations in Manitoba, and towards the end I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what some of the activities our foundation is undertaking here. So I'll turn the floor over to Grant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's a privilege to be here today to speak with you, to update you on what's happening with the STARS program here in your community and within the province. Before I get started, I just want to say that our team was dispatched to your community today, this afternoon, and I just wanted to commend the fine work of your City Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services personnel, RCMP, and other workers that were on scene. It was a multi-agency response, and we were proud to be a part of that, and just wanted to comment on what we saw there. It was great. So I'm just going to advance the slide here. Great. So a little bit about STARS. It stands for Shock Trauma Air Rescue Service. We're a helicopter emergency medical services system. We were founded in 1985. We're a not-for-profit charitable organization with a foundation. We've flown more than 39,000 missions since 1985 through 6 bases now in Western Canada, and on average we fly about 2 missions a day here in Manitoba. Simply put, we exist to save lives. STARS was born out of necessity. Too many people living in rural areas were dying needlessly. People weren't getting the care they needed fast enough. So when our first helicopter took flight in 1985, we radically changed the way critical care was delivered. We built a community of allies to help us fight and better deliver the care that people deserved. Today we continue that fight as innovators, as boundary pushers, and as world leaders in emergency medical service. Our patients are the reason we fly. They're the reason we wake up every day striving to find the most innovative way to succeed. Half of all Western Canadians live in rural areas where emergency ground transport isn't always the fast enough. Thousands of people every year rely on STARS for advanced care and direct transport to hospital. As long as there's people in need of critical care, we'll be there to offer support. On board each helicopter is a crew of paramedics, flight nurses, flight physicians, and our aviation crew consists of pilots and engineers. So it's a multidisciplinary team that comes together to offer this service. Today in your community, we flew a paramedic, a nurse, and a physician to the roadside. The history, it used to be a white helicopter, and it was because our founding service club was the Lions Club. It was first started off as the Lions Air Ambulance Service back in 1985, and as you can see, we've evolved over the years, opening bases as the demand grew, and in 2011 we opened a base here in Winnipeg. So 6 bases across 3 provinces in Western Canada. Next slide, please. In 2012, we signed a 10-year service agreement with the Government of Manitoba to provide helicopter air ambulance from a permanent base in Winnipeg. We've just come off our busiest fiscal year, where we saw the helicopter fly 720 missions this past fiscal, and our rolling summary is over 2,600 missions since we set up the base here. So very busy. We publish this on our website every year, showing you the communities we've flown to. This Steinbach community is always within our top 5 communities in terms of volume. We fly out to your community a lot. This past year we were here 24 times. These are just images that you might have seen. We're always on scene with our partners, the paramedics, firefighters, and images of our work in your communities. Some of the initiatives that have helped along the way here is this was a big game changer for us, the opening of the Health Sciences helipad in 2016. We've had a full year of service under that platform, and it's been a game changer. We're finding that we're dropping off patients and there's calls waiting for us to come back to the community to care for more patients. So that's allowed us to be busier and provide care to more patients. A couple of our innovations I want to highlight before I turn it over to Mr. Kowalson is we've begun carrying blood on board. This is an innovation that saw us as the first helicopter air ambulance to provide that. We can now provide a roadside blood transfusion for someone who requires life-saving interventions. So this is not possible without the Foundation's involvement, the donors, the supporters of our program. So. Another innovation is our night vision technology. We were the first civilian agency to utilize night vision goggles that allows us to fly to your community day or night. This is an example of what that would look like as we approach a community on the left. With the night vision goggles, our pilots are able to see, obviously, the landscape a lot better. The last innovation I want to highlight is a new one for us. In January, we began training flight nurses and flight paramedics on the use of onboard ultrasound. So we're providing, using this diagnostic tool to help guide life-saving interventions, and we're doing this right at the bedside or roadside. And so that's, again, we're the one of the only ones that have nurses and paramedics actually doing what is historically a physician task. So, and I'll just end with this final slide on my portion, and it's the mobile simulation program. You may have seen this in your community. It's a mobile simulation lab where we bring training to communities for physicians, nurses, and paramedics. It's offered at no cost. It's just an arm of our program. And we're proud to say that we've been here numerous times, the hospital here, helping train staff. And it's just another value that we add within our program. So just wanted to highlight that. And I think at this point, I'll just turn it over to my colleague here to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. So I want to talk about our allies. STARS is fueled by generosity. Our funding model is unique. We rely on the support of government to get us into the air, but to keep us on the cutting edge of critical medical care, we look to the support of our community and to build allies and relationships. And that's within the business community, individual donors, volunteers, other foundations, and our municipal partners. When you support STARS, you're riding along on every single mission with us. You put the most advanced tools in our hands, and you help ensure that our crew receives the top training. And when time is of the essence, you drive us to do our best work, which in turn helps save lives. As Grant mentioned, we did enter into a service agreement with the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, and we have consistently every year, the demand and the need has grown, and one of the strengths of STARS across Western Canada is the diversity of our funding model. And that's one of the things that makes our service not subject to many things that may be going on when we have diverse funding and allies that are supporting us from many different places in the community. Some of the things you may have heard about that our foundation is active in Manitoba is STARS Rescue on the Island. This is our sixth year, I'm sorry, on September 6, 2018, and I believe 3 years ago, Mayor Gertson, you were on the island, and your community did rescue you, because I see you here tonight. And that's always a fun event. And one of the main reasons we wanted to come tonight was to tell you about May 16th and 17th, so coming up just in 2.5 weeks or so, is our very first in Manitoba critical care on the air radiothon. We've partnered with Golden West Broadcasting. Steinbach is going to be one of the lead communities for that endeavor, and I believe there's about 5 or 7 Golden West stations across southern Manitoba and into Portage la Prairie who will be broadcasting. And again, I believe, Mayor Gertson, that you've kindly agreed to be interviewed and to talk about that. So we really hope that you'll all tune into that, and if anybody wants to volunteer, you can certainly be in touch with Grant and I, and we'd love to have you out that day. Our municipal initiative and why we're here today. Another reason why we're here today. Reality is Manitoba has a growing, aging population. We have increasing call volume, 6 to 10% every year, which results in increasing operational costs. We view ourselves as, and we hope you view us as, part of your emergency protective services in this community. STARS reduces risk and mitigate challenges with the chain of survival partners. We keep your community safer by transporting critically ill and injured individuals to the specialized medical care that they need, while leaving your first responders and our partners at home here in the community. Rural residents are obviously disadvantaged by time and distance. And STARS, one of our main objectives is to support rural healthcare delivery by increasing access for rural Manitobans to state-of-the-art medical treatment and enabling local emergency medical providers to remain in their community instead of traveling with patients long distances to urban hospitals. Just a quick overview. Steinbach, just in the last 3 years, 89 missions, like Grant said, always near the top. We do, as you can see, a lot of interfacility transports from your hospital here to HSC or St. Boniface. And that helipad at HSC has really been a game changer. We no longer have to land at Richardson International Airport and then transport, but it really makes a difference to somebody, especially in one of those interfacility transportation scenarios. So STARS in Manitoba municipalities, we believe that it's a partnership to save lives. And our request is simple, that as leaders in your community, that you recognize STARS as a valued part of your emergency protective services, that we enhance the safety and quality of life of your residents, and to help ensure sustainability of STARS emergency services for Manitoba. STARS belongs to all of Manitoba, all Manitobans. Your kind consideration to join with nearly 40 other municipalities with STARS in partnership with a pledge of support annually through your protective services budget would be most appreciated. As I mentioned, we have nearly 40 municipalities in Manitoba. In Alberta and Saskatchewan, STARS raises significant funds into the millions of dollars of support from municipalities. Alberta, the initiative was first started there about a decade and a half ago. Many municipalities support us through a per capita $1 per resident donation. Others pick another figure. It's, many discussions I'm sure go on about how I arrive at that. We have about a dozen municipalities in Manitoba who support through the dollar per capita, and about 30 others who've just picked figures that their community is comfortable with. So if there's any questions, I would be pleased to take them, and we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you at our radiothon. And the final thing I'll say, and Grant is going to join me here because he's much better addressing operational questions than I am, is we would be most pleased to host any of you for a tour of our base in Winnipeg. We're located at the Richardson Airport on West Hanger Road. We'd love to see you there, and please be in touch if you have half an hour or 40 minutes to come by and see what really is a flying emergency room in the sky. We'd love to show it to you, and we'd love to have you visit us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There might be just a few questions, but before we get to the question, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the organization that you are, and how you do make a significant difference for people across Manitoba. So with that, Councillor Penner.
Thank you for you. Thank you for the presentation. That was very informative, and I enjoyed learning more about it. Just wondering, in terms of funding, do you get provincial funding, federal funding? How does your funding model work? What % comes from where?
Sure. So it's a mixed funding model, primarily provincial funded, offset by our foundation. So for every dollar raised, it's a dollar we don't take from the budget we're allocated through the province. Currently, each province has a different percentage of what that looks like. Manitoba, we're building our foundation, so we're at about 11% of our budget comes from the foundation, support from foundation. The balance
and
comes
89 from the province?
From the province, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? We appreciate, sorry, was there anything else? No. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and we wish you well in what you're doing across Manitoba, and we thank you whenever we see you. Although we don't like to see you in the sky, we know it's really important work that you're doing. So
thank you.
Thank you.
We would prefer the helicopter never took off the ground, but unfortunately that's probably not a reality. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
Thank you. All right, Council, we'll now move to 8B, and that's a request as a delegation of Mr. Hiebert. You waited patiently for us here. Mr. or Mrs. Hiebert, you can choose who would like to present. Please take the podium, state your name and your address, and I'll give you a few minutes. Normally it's maximum 10 minutes, but not everyone has to take the full 10 if you like.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I tried to convince her to do the talking because she's so much younger and more beautiful than I am, but here I am. Thank you for allowing us to make a presentation this evening. The purpose of this presentation is to ask that the city relocate the proposed sidewalk on Brighton Lane closer to the curb and to give some supporting arguments for this request. I do want to say, first of all, that we have always been advocates of a sidewalk in our area. There's lots of kids there. It's a route to school, and a sidewalk is definitely necessary, particularly because we see the kids walking to and from school on the street, and that's not a good thing. And of course, having been an educator all my life, I have been charged with the responsibility of providing safety for many a child in my life, and I've been grateful that it has worked for the most part. However, when the surveyor came to place stakes on our sidewalk, we were a little bit taken aback at where they were being placed. Not on Lyndhurst Gate, that's fine, that has nothing to do with this issue, but on Brighton Lane. Brighton Lane has a very wide boulevard. So we feel there is room to move on the sidewalk. We have had several email communications with the city engineer and the city administrator regarding our concerns, and we've also personally met with both of these gentlemen, and we do thank them for taking the time to do this. However, our communication convinced us that the sidewalk proposal must be as indicated to us. When we asked both gentlemen to give us clear reasons why the sidewalk could not be moved, we were not given any reason. Still don't know why. One of the email received from the city states, and I will quote it from the email, "The standard location for sidewalks within the public road allowances is usually 1 foot from the property line. This indicates to us that the location of the sidewalk is not carved in stone. So we asked whether that left room to move the sidewalk perhaps a little bit farther away from our property line. We were never told it couldn't be done, so we assume it can be. And another email we received from city staff states, and again I'll quote from the email, "It is important for the city to have fair, equitable, and consistent application of standards and requirements for the overall good and best interests of the community." Now I'm going to interject something here, and that is that I hope we're looking at the community of Lyndhurst Gate and Brighton Lane, who will be the primary users of it, and that we're not worrying about the community in Southland or somewhere else in town. So we asked for clarification on the wording, best interests of the community. It was communicated to us that it is tied to infrastructure already in place on the boulevard area and making sure we do not obstruct such infrastructure. Well, Brighton Lane Boulevard is free and clear of infrastructure. There's nothing there. The Brighton Lane Boulevard, we have a copy from the Manitoba Hydro regarding their gas and hydro lines. They enter our house from Lyndhurst Gate. The city staff came and marked the sewer and water lines. They also are on Lyndhurst Gate. So that indicates to us that there are no infrastructure issues there. There are a couple of safety concerns that I want to draw to your attention. One involves in terms of how we built our house with, well actually we didn't build it, G&E Homes built it for us. We put in extra large basement windows, and that required extra large window wells. So if the sidewalk is placed 1 foot from our property line, those window wells are this far from the sidewalk. Now, I am concerned about children driving their bikes that far from those window wells, walking, etc. As you know, children are not very spatially inclined. They're easily distracted. And as one of my neighbors, young neighbors that came by and told me, you know, I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I could see her easily slipping into that window well. Very dangerous. That's one concern. Another concern involves the ever-loving sump pump issue that I know the city has had to deal with from time to time. Unfortunately, we have a deep basement. I don't know, G&E decided to put a very deep sump pump hole in there, and it pumps water. Of the 6 winters we've lived there, it has pumped water onto the side yard there all winter long. This year, it didn't pump any water after January 15th. I guess it's too dry out there. But you can imagine that water flowing down toward Brighton Lane across the sidewalk. That sidewalk would become a skating rink. And what else are we going to do with that water? We have no choice. It's this far from the sidewalk. Anyway, so that would be a significant safety issue for people using the sidewalk in winter. There's a small other issue. I don't know if this is a safety issue or if this even enters into it. I'm not into this kind of stuff, but I know our furnace exhaust fan or our exhaust system also would blow right across the sidewalk. Now maybe that's not an issue. I don't know. I'll have to ask people who install furnaces. Then there's an insurance concern for us. We need to have our downspouts from our gutters 6 feet from the house. The sidewalk is 5 feet from the house, so we would not be able to meet that requirement, and as you're all well aware, you all have house insurance, that if in the event of basement flooding, if you do not meet that requirement, the insurance will not cover you. Very simple. So that, I think it's very unlikely we would ever have flooding, but I've learned in my lifetime, I've lived a little longer than some, that you never say never. Things like that do happen. We have actually we have 4 more arguments. 2 are personal, 2 are of a general nature. One involves those mailboxes on the side of our yard. They're beautiful things. I love the mailboxes. Don't have to bother coming down to pick up mail anymore. And when they installed them years ago, I was a cheerleader for those too. But they could create something very awkward in our neighborhood if the sidewalk is placed 5 feet from our house and the mailboxes are moved all the way there. It leaves a significant green space. And having lived there, I know what the snow pattern is. The drifts on the side of the yard sometimes get to be 3 and 4 feet high. I'm kind of wondering how the mail person is going to deliver from the street, Brighton Lane Street. How are they going to navigate that space across the snow to put the mail in there, in the boxes? The other issue is we have probably most people, or a lot of people, that pull by the mailboxes, pick up the mail on the way home from work. That would become impossible for them to do. So in our neighborhood, that it's a bit of a convenience issue. I think it's a bit of an issue that the taxpayers in our neighborhood, and I haven't talked to anybody, by the way. I didn't go around broadcasting and cheerleading for this cause. Marlene and I decided to take up the issue just as it stands. But the placement of the mailboxes, and there are 80 mailboxes there, so there's potentially 80 people that come there every day. So I believe those mailboxes need to be a little bit closer to the street so that the provider and the users have better access to them. We have been told that the decorative entrance to Berkeley Bend, and this is sort of a secondary issue, which indicates the entrance to the subdivision there, that entrance would have to be altered. It's only been in place 2 years. And so that would require removal of rocks, removal of curbing, then replacing the torn down curbing with new curbing, patching pavement. We believe that by placing the sidewalk appropriately along Brighton Lane, that expense does not have to be incurred. And I'll leave that with you. Then there are 2 very personal items. I think the first one has to do with privacy. We have a large dining room window overlooking the side yard. And when you have a sidewalk that's close enough that people can spit against your window as they walk by, it's just a personal thing. It really is. But we really don't feel that, given all the room that there is, that it's fair to us to force us to look our neighbors in the eye when they walk by while we're sitting at our dining room table doing what you do at a dining room table. So it's really, there's no expense involved. There's lots of room. There doesn't seem to be any valid reason why that sidewalk had to simply be pushed a little closer to the street and give us fair privacy of all the people that come through our neighborhood. Then this one maybe for us, we believe is very significant. We believe that if the sidewalk is placed that close to our house, it will devalue our property. Now, one of the things that creates and enhances property value is curb appeal. I don't think I have to convince you of that. Now, my dear wife worked in real estate for 12 years and knows quite a bit about curb appeal and how it relates to property value, so I don't think this is a stretch for us to suggest that we would lose property value. In talking to one of the city officials, the response is very simple. Don't worry about it. In time, it will regain its value. For crying out loud, I'm 70 years old, and at 1% a year regain a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 loss. I'm never going to regain it. It's just that simple. But that's just for nothing. Okay, that's just for nothing. Okay, so placing that sidewalk 5 feet from our house doesn't seem to be a particularly practical, common sense thing to do. And let's use a little bit of common sense here, ladies and gentlemen. And I've been known for a bit of common sense. I'm going to finish with this. Dare I suggest that there is likely not a single person in this room who would be happy with this placement if it was on your property. I've asked a lot of people that question, at least those who've come around, and everybody said, no way. I wouldn't want to have people staring at me when I'm sitting at my dining room window, etc. So, we hope that the city infrastructure would never put us or any other homeowner at a very direct, to take a very direct hit on property value the way that we're asked to be taken, the hit that we're being asked to take. I don't think that's fair. You know, we have, as I said at the outset, we have not discussed it with any neighbor. Although, when the stakes have been sitting there now for several weeks, we've had a lot of neighbors come by and say, what's going on in your yard? What's happening here? And we have just said to them, well, this is what's happening. And so, and then of course we've had visitors and company that come by and you know, I'll be fair with you. I went and showed them, this is where they're planning to put the sidewalk along Brighton Lane. Every single response I've got was, the first two words out of their mouth, you're kidding. And the second word out of their mouth, why? And they looked toward, so I think I could have filled this and overfilled this with flowing with support from people in our neighborhood and others. I will leave it at that. We simply believe we have valid reasons for making our request. It's doable, it's at no cost to anybody, and I think it is fair to us, it's fair to our neighborhood who have to use the mailboxes that happen to be right there, and it provides us enough space that hopefully we can address some of these safety concerns and issues that I have raised here. Thank you so much, appreciate you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hiebert. So I just want to clarify your actual request, and that is that you aren't opposed to the sidewalk, you're opposed to the location, and you'd like it moved over. Do you have an amount that you're looking to have it moved over?
Well, on a very practical, again, I'm a pragmatist, and on a very practical level, I think it should be moved as close to the existing mailboxes as possible, and those mailboxes, I understand, simply get turned to face the sidewalk so that they're easily accessible. And if that would be done, like I say, it would be easy and simple for everybody as far as the mailboxes are concerned. I know that you're not mailbox people, that's a post office duty and responsibility, but I believe working together in such a way that it does not create problems for people who have to access those crazy mailboxes might also enter into this equation a bit.
All right,
So
you don't
right
have an
by the
exact
mailboxes.
number, but okay, I understand. Okay.
Why not? Right behind the mailbox, there's plenty of room, just
All right, thank
Good
you.
luck.
There might be a few questions, but then we'll have just some questions for administration as well. So after those questions. Questions for Mr. Hiebert?
Quick question, how far is it from the boulevard to where the sidewalk speaks?
well, the boulevard is
Sidewalk from
22
your house.
feet wide, okay?
Boulevard's 22 feet
So if
to your
they
property
do it
line.
1 foot from from our property line, that means, and the sidewalk, I understand, is planned at 5 foot width.
So it's
So,
about,
yeah.
so it's about 15 feet from the sidewalk to the boulevard. I can ask
A little
that
bit
of
more.
administration.
A little bit more, 17 probably in that neighborhood.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Hiebert? Yes, Mr. Fair.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. The first one is, when you bought the house, was there any talk about a sidewalk going by that part of your house at that time?
Nope.
The other question is, when in any of your dialogue with anybody from the city, were you privy to any diagram like this, which showed where the...
After the fact. After it was declared it would be built there, then we were given that paper.
Thank you. Further questions for Mr. Hiebert? Seeing none, thank you very much. We may have a few questions for administration. You're welcome to sit and listen to the discussion there. All right, Mr. Workentine, I don't know if you have anything to add. There might be some questions. I know we also have Mr. Kalita here. Mr. Workentine, when it comes to the request, obviously, this is outside the norm of the spec that we normally have for this type of installation. Do you have any comments or how would you like to proceed with information?
Well, perhaps, I mean, if there are questions, as mentioned, City's engineer, Mr. Phil Kalita, is present with respect to matters of the city spec and construction standards within the right-of-way. and public right-of-ways in general, I would recommend that Mr. Kalita provide some background information if council wishes to hear.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Can we get a
Yes, we can.
picture of it on the screen?
Yeah. Mr. Kalita, go ahead, take the podium. Rana, if you could, can you pull something up? Yeah, very good. Mr. Kalita, I know you did have a memo that you did give to administration or city manager, and I know I did receive it as well. Would you be able to give just a summary of some of the points there because the request is to, let's be frank, superficially when you look at something like this, it might seem easy to move. Can you go through maybe some of the reasons why it can't be, or maybe some of the reasons why it can be? But can you go through maybe the memo and then go from there?
Okay, yeah, this particular situation, the sidewalk has been designed as it is specified in our standard construction specification manual. Excuse me. All of the works we do within the public right-of-way is follow this manual, the specification. And the reason we follow it is because it creates consistency. The manual's been in place since 1989. It was adopted by council. And there have been some revisions over time as technology and standards change. But basically, it's been intact since 1989. And it's helped guide us through the growth spurts we've had and everything, and kept development within the public right-of-way orderly. The engineering department's job is to make sure that the right-of-ways are developed orderly and with some planning and forethought. So the detail S17 that was up there, sorry? Detail there. This is an example of a typical residential right-of-way and what all goes into the right-of-way. It looks like there's nothing there. But in fact, it's quite busy and it's quite complicated, and there's a reason why everything's there. Everything has its place within the right-of-way. The street lights, there's gas lines, there's telephone and communication cables, TV lines, wastewater sewer, land drainage sewer, water mains, catch basins, the street itself. All that's got its position and place within the right-of-way, so that when the utilities go in and do something, they know what to expect, they know what's in the way. All these locations have been predetermined and collaborated with the utilities to determine where they're all going to go. They've all agreed that this is where I'm going to go and put my stuff in, and then we won't end up having conflicts. So there's a reason. Now, in our discussion with the Hieberts, they said, some other areas in town have the sidewalks closer to the curb. Well, perhaps it is, but that's because it's an older right-of-way and it's narrower. It's still 1 foot from the property line. All these measurements, you'll see the reference point is the property line. Everything's measured relative to the property line, and that's where they all go. So moving a fire hydrant over 6 feet closer, or 2 feet closer to the property line doesn't seem like much, but it now interferes with the gas line. It now interferes with the sidewalk. One thing leads to another. A good example was right in front of the Hiebert's house. There was a street light that was installed incorrectly by Manitoba Hydro at time of initial development. It interfered with the sidewalk. They had to come and relocate that sidewalk, the street light, a couple weeks ago to get it ready for us to install a sidewalk. So that's what happens when things aren't in the right spot. They interfere with something. Brighton Lane in particular is a fully developed right-of-way, except for the sidewalk. All the other utilities are there. They're all in their spot. If we deviate from a location which the request is, there's now going to be a ripple effect of things that's going to be in the way. The street lights may be in the way. We may have to relocate the street lights. There's manhole covers and sewer facilities that may have to get relocated or adjusted to make way for the sidewalk. So, and right now, this particular sidewalk project, it's designed, it's tendered, it's been has been awarded and signed. Construction technically slated to start within a week and a half. If there's no real reason to move it, I understand Mr. Hiebert's personal concerns, but that's what they are. We followed our spec book with this sidewalk. It's in place. As far as, and we're following, and where this sidewalk is actually placed is following North American standards all over, where number one concern is safety. You try and locate the sidewalk as far away as possible from the street. The street is for vehicular traffic, the sidewalk's for pedestrian traffic. You separate those as much as you can, and it's not so much to prevent accidents, it's the comfort level that the pedestrian feels. The further they are away from the street, the more comfort there is. So that's why this location's been chosen. It gives us a maximum separation. Now, the spec book, which you're following, there's also a clause I'd like to read out of there, which, like Mr. Hiebert says, it's a guide, but it says that the City Steinbach standards are meant to govern construction of public works. They should not, unless specified by a specific contract, be considered as a rigid requirement where variation will achieve a better technical or economic solution. So in this particular case, there's no technical reason to vary the sidewalk, and the economic solution will result in more cost. So from the city's perspective, that's not a good solution. So from a technical engineering perspective, we would recommend leaving it as is. And the way to move it is that you'd have to physically adjust this standard. We'd have to vary this standard. If you do want it located, you're going to have to tell us what the new standard will be so that we can move forward and be consistent again.
Okay, thank you. There might be some questions for you. I don't mean to interrupt, but if you have any, do you have anything else to say?
No, that's probably sums up the presentation. I don't know if I wanted to go through Mr. Hiebert's individual items, but it's up to you.
Okay, Councillor Fair and then Councillor Penn.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot of corner properties in the city of Steinbach. Is this unusual to have a sidewalk this close to a home? And is this caused by some event that happened in the past that might maybe should have not happened? Or?
Well, again, our standard is the property line. That's our reference point. Now, whether it's a frontage of a property or a flankage, this is what we follow. Now, there are some, in this particular case, the Hieberts only have a 5-foot side yard, so they're correct. Their building is very close to the property line. But this particular developer in this area asked for the zoning to be revised to go from an 8-foot corner side yard to a 5-foot side yard. So that allowance for that side yard kind of created this, because like Mr. Hiebert said, if he had another 3 feet, it might be a different story, right? So that's something to consider with some of the zoning requirements. Again, those measurements are there for a reason.
Thank you, Councillor Fair. Supplementary, and then Councillor Penner.
Question to that. Now, is it incumbent upon the developer to divulge the variance to a prospective home buyer when they sell it? For just plainly, I wonder if this was divulged to the Hieberts when they bought this property, that there was a variance and that the sidewalk would be 3 feet closer than what it should be.
I'm not sure, but they would have been presented with probably a site plan which would have showed what was going on. I'm not aware of what we hear a lot of stories about realtors that maybe didn't say a few things, and they come to our office and say, well, I wasn't told that. And We hear that quite often.
Councillor Penner.
For you. Hi. Mr. Hiebert indicated that on that side of the house there isn't underground infrastructure, that their underground infrastructure actually comes from the front and not from the side. Is that the case, or is there underground?
Well, he's partially correct. There's no underground infrastructure servicing his home. His home is serviced from Lyndhurst, but there is infrastructure running servicing Brighton Lane. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And it's the main lines, like the major infrastructure.
Okay, further questions. Councillor Funk.
Yes, I've got two questions. One being, now we saw the infrastructure that's underneath by Brighton Lane. Now, does all that infrastructure need to be accessed from the top? Or is some of it, if we would move the sidewalk, can some be accessed from the side?
Well, it's buried infrastructure, so like the telecommunication lines, those are usually fine because they're accessed from cabinets, which are located. It's any of the pressurized or piping that's carrying fluids, like the gas lines, the wastewater sewers, or the land drainage sewers. Those, if there's any connections that has to be made or repairs made, that's all going to be done from on top right over. And so if the sidewalk is in the vicinity, then the sidewalk, in order to make that repair, a portion of the sidewalk has to be removed and taken out of service in order to do that. So it's extra cost for the utility company that has to do the work, and inconvenience for people wanting to use the sidewalk.
Thank you. Councillor Zwaagstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to zero in on, in terms of the particular property that we're talking about, hypothetically, if the sidewalk was, let's say, moved 2 or 3 feet over, what specific infrastructure would be impacted?
Immediately would be the street lights on the block. No. And the...
Sorry, Mr. Hiebert.
Because if we're going to move, the whole block will be relocated. It wouldn't just be a portion. We want to keep it consistent, straight line, and that's numerous reasons, mainly for the Public Works Department with maintenance and all that. So we would keep it consistent and run it through. And then the next would probably be we're getting into where the sewer mains are. So for sure the manhole covers or access points for the sewers would have to be adjusted and relocated to match the sidewalk properly.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Funk.
Just to clarify that, to move just that first portion of the side yard, just that sidewalk over is not an option because it doesn't line up with the other sidewalk, and that would be for snow clearing. Okay.
Yeah.
And my second question is, if we would move the sidewalk, why does that create a new standard all over the city?
Well, because we need some policy direction in order to install them, right? The policy we're following is the spec book, right? So in order to deviate, it's got to be a good technical, we need technical or financial reasons, and there aren't any. So right now, it will require a policy change from the way I read the book and the way it's set up.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? So, Mr. Cleta, let me just restate then the argument that you're making. Number one is this is a policy that has been approved, or a standard that's been approved by council and previous councils, and so this is what you're following. The second thing that you're specifically saying is there will be additional change costs if we would by chance change, ask you to deviate from this. Is that correct?
Yeah, the change would require the engineer to redo the plans based on whatever the new adopted offset would be. He'd have to go through that and after those plans are in place, see what obstacles are in the way to do that. We'd have to then present it to the contractor who's bid on the project this way and now has to bid on it another way and see if there's any additional costs or if he's going to hold his price. So there's a lot of steps involved because we're under contract right now.
And the additional reason that you're giving is that it's not necessarily immediate, but in the future when lines are worked on, when other pieces of the infrastructure underground and above ground are worked on, then that will cause potential additional costs at that time as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's current immediate installation costs, capital costs, and then there's long-term maintenance costs.
Very good. Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Cluta. Mr. Workington, anything to add?
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, Council, we do have a request to obviously deviate from what the standard policy is. Does Council wish to act today, or what would you choose to, what action do you wish to take, if any? Councillor Penner.
I don't believe we need a motion.
I believe you can just state your opinion at this
Okay.
time.
I appreciate the difficulties that the Hieberts are faced with in this instance, because their side yard, which was where the sidewalk is going, is shortened because of the developer's request. So if that developer had allowed the usual standard to apply, they would not be in this dilemma. That's very fair, and that's true. However, because of the cost involved and the contract's already been awarded, I don't see the economic or technical benefit of altering city standards on sidewalks at this time. So that being said, I think we need to leave things the way they are. It's unfortunate in this instance, but this will just bring more cost and nullify the contract that's already in place.
Okay, thank you. We're hearing from Councillor Penner that no action is required. Is there anyone here wishing to, Councillor Funk?
I have another question. Is this maybe goes back to the homeowner, Mr. Hiebert. Is there any structure that he's put in, i.e. Edging or trees or anything that need to be moved at this point? And could we help with the cost of that moving?
I'll maybe actually refer that to Mr. Kalita if he has an answer to that, because he would have the technical.
Yes, part of our procedure with this is to go in advance to communicate with residents that do have some structures or plantings or something that's off their property and could be affected by the project. So that's how we first made contact with the Hieberts. There was a tree, an evergreen type tree on the Brighton side that was in the sidewalk area, and a couple small planter edgings, which the one I don't think we have to touch. One we may have to trim to get our form boards in. But again, we will point that out, and like we said, we will point that out to the crews and minimize what we have to remove of the existing ones. The tree will have to be removed, and we gave the Hieberts the option to salvage that tree if they could. But at the time they said that the tree, they knew it was off the lot and they knew it might be expendable at the time. So I believe they said it was okay to take down. I think that's still the case, but they do have a concrete ring around there right now. So we're going to get the crews to attempt to cut that ring into quarters and put it to the side so they could reuse it later at another time. It's a poured in place concrete ring, so it's a little difficult to maneuver, but the contractor, I think we could convince them to do that for them.
Okay. Mr. Funk, does that answer your question?
Just as long as we can be, congenial and helpful with anything that is going to change on their yard because it's so very, very close.
Okay, thank you. All right. Pardon me?
Did we speak further to Mr. Kalita's comment?
Normally what we do is we have a delegation and then we proceed. If you so, Council, do you wish to give them further time or, yeah. Normally what we do is we have a delegation, you have your time, and then we make a decision, so, yeah, thank you. All right, further, any action wishing to be taken by Council? Any action? All right, thank you, Council. Councillor Fair?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I sympathize with the Hieberts. I've grappled with this a lot, and I don't see that we have a lot of options. I mean, if, we may be able to move it 6 inches to get away with it, I don't think 6 inches is going to help them here. I wish there was a way that we could enforce, if there's a variance issued, that it is discussed with the homeowner. Because if that had happened, now really what's happened is that this has been passed off to us. Now we're the bad guys because we're not, trying to make things better to solve a problem that came up as a result of somebody else not divulging some information that they should have when this property changed hands. And so I'm disappointed in that, and I wish there was something else that we could do. I can't see us moving it on top of a gas line. And so with that, I just, I don't know. I think we have no options here.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, Council, then we will leave this and we will move on to the next topics on our agenda. All right, we now will move to reports and recommendations from the City Manager. Mr. Workentine, anything further to add?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do have one item that I would like to report to Council. If you have driven on PTH 52 West within the last 24 hours or so, you may have noticed that there are temporary 70 kilometer per hour speed zone signs that have been erected just west of Lund Road to a point just west of Industrial Road intersection. We did receive word late last week from the Highway Traffic Board that the board has ruled to accept the recommendations of the MIT traffic engineer with respect to the speed zones that I did report on last council meeting. And action has been very swift, and the recommendations have resulted in those speed zone signs being put up. And I expect that the permanent signage would be installed at some point once that can be scheduled.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, we need to thank him.
Thank you. Yes, certainly thank our MLA, thank those who, all of us who have participated in pushing this forward, including Mr. Workentine, who did appear at that hearing as well. Thank you. Then now let's move to 10A, the accounts payable in the back of the book. Can I have a motion to approve the accounts payable, please? You all had a chance to review them. Councillor Fair, second by Councillor Penner. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have financial statements ending the 31st. You've had a chance to review those. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Siemens. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? We have 10C, Bylaw 2093, Heritage Parkway Road opening. This is on page 21. Mr. Workentine, if you can just briefly introduce this, please.
Sure. This is a road opening in the land development that would be just west of the Bethesda Primary Healthcare Center, as indicated on the sketch. This bylaw second and third reading is recommended so that the road and public reserve may be opened.
Thank you. Council, how would you like to proceed?
Move second reading.
Move first reading? I mean, sorry. Second reading, thank you. Councillor, it's been a long meeting. Councillor Fair, Councillor Funk seconds that. Okay, any discussion?
No, I think we discussed this last meeting. So.
Okay, all right. Anything further? Seeing nothing, call for the question. All those in favor of second reading? Approved. Thank you. Can I have a motion for third reading, please? Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Funk. Any discussions? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have the 10D, Bylaw 2095, Realty and Education Tax Levy. This is third reading on page 25. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Fair, second by Councillor Siemens. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We will now move to Bylaw 10E, Bylaw 2096, 2018 Business Tax Levy. This is also third reading on page 29. Can I have someone move that, please? Councillor Zwaagstra, Councillor Funk. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have 10F, the Bylaw 2094. This is Lexington Village. This is page 32. Mr. Workentine.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, this is an application for rezoning for the development commonly known as Lexington Village. There are a variety of amendments with respect to residential single-family, residential low-density, and residential medium-density lots, as is shown on page 36 sketch and draft public notice. Recommendation is for council to give this rezoning application first reading. That will permit the public hearing to be scheduled for the first council meeting of June.
Thank you. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Penner?
Move to approve?
Thank you. Second by Councillor Zwaagstra. Any discussion?
No, this just allows us to have a public hearing and hear it if anybody in the neighborhood has anything to say about it.
See if there's any gophers in the field there that care.
Make sure we ask where the sidewalks are going.
Good point. Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Bylaw 2097. This is in regards to 122, 124 Brant Street. This is page 42. Mr. Workington.
Again, similar application. However, this is a rezoning application for property at 122 Brant Street. The application is to rezone the subject properties from RLD residential low density to RMD residential medium density to permit multifamily residential complex construction. Again, recommendation is for council to give this first reading and then a public hearing may be scheduled again for the first council meeting of June.
Thank you. Councillor Penner.
Move first reading.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Funk. Any discussion?
No discussion. We need a public hearing.
Thank you. Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Workington, we will let them know that they do have, at present on page 52, they have a 15-foot backyard rather than a 25-foot backyard. They will be notified of that they do not have a variation application in this process?
Well, at first reading, it doesn't require the application for variance. However, that will be made known to the applicant.
Okay, very good. Any questions of council? Councillor Siemens.
Through you to administration.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Back to the sidewalk issue. The question I have for administration, why wasn't there a report filed with council prior to this meeting? I'm a little disappointed in the fact that we're pushed to make a decision here or some point without proper information or with enough information, background information. So I appreciate Mr. Kalita's report to us and all the things initiated. I also appreciate the Hieberts, and I understand their passion and what their desire is, but I think at some point council needed to see a report. This has been a conflict that's been going on for some time. The mayor's been aware of it. Councils have an indication that it's been happening. But there should have been a report filed with council before this meeting so that we could get an update, so we could make a decision, so that we could go meet with the Hieberts if that's what it is. What are all the options to the sidewalk? Of course, we agreed that there was nothing the city could do or that we would do at this time because the contracts have been let, but I do think that it would have been appropriate for us to have a report with all the information ahead of time. And I would like to ask administration, why was there no report filed?
All right. Before Mr. Workington, I'll ask you to comment, but just to be clear, the history of this was that the Hieberts did bring this up to maybe a few council members, but also to me as well in a grocery aisle. We did send them to have a discussion with administration, and they started with Mr. Kalita, and they weren't satisfied with the response, and so they did then come back to me or maybe some other councillors, and we again suggested that they meet with Mr. Workington. They did that, and they again weren't satisfied, and then finally they made the request to meet with council. That's the process that we normally follow. When someone makes a delegation, we don't automatically have all the information there, but I did ask administration to be prepared to answer any questions. But Mr. Workington, do you have anything to add?
I would concur with the point of delegations. Normally delegations, when they are scheduled, it is so that council may hear the initial presentation of the individual or group that is presenting. And as a normal process, Delegations, when presenting, do present the information. It is extremely rare for council to receive further information or background from administration at the time of the delegation. However, at this point, council chose to deal with the matter immediately.
Yeah. And just for clarification, I know there's some pressure to make a decision today, and part of it is that they did ask for a delegation this last week, or after this last council meeting. And to do that, normally we'd either set them up for either the first meeting or the second meeting in May, but the work is already taking place. The decision had to be made quickly if there was going to be a change, and that is partly why there was an expedited process with this, and that's also why we asked them to have administration here today rather than ask for a report, which would have delayed it. So, yeah. Does that answer some questions?
Just a further comment to it, though, is you're absolutely correct. That is exactly what happened, all those issues. It still would be preferred that we get a report so that we can view it ahead of time so that we don't have to do this in a public setting. So at this point, it would have been adequate or would have been appreciated to have a report ahead of time so we can deal with it, therefore. There was other people on council here who had more information than what I did, and there was a report filed with you through administration, and that report got handed out in advance here, a few of them, and I think all of council needed all the information so that we can be more objective about the whole sidewalk situation.
Just to be clear that this information did come out this afternoon, and
Never. It wasn't in my mailbox.
And it wasn't to you specifically, it was to
That's
administration.
fine. I got all kinds of stuff in my mailbox, but I didn't get anything about the sidewalk, so I couldn't review anything ahead of time.
All right. Councillor Swag, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that there's normal procedure and then there's unique circumstances. Normal procedure, obviously, when you have a delegation, as has been stated, we wouldn't normally get a report with a delegation because we don't know for sure everything they're going to say. I would suggest, however, for future reference, that when we do know specifically what the delegation is going to request, because there's been some issues around it, in those circumstances, it would be helpful to have, a written summary, a written report, when we know what the request is going to be, and we know that administration is going to have to give us some specific recommendations, and we know we have a time crunch, which doesn't usually happen with delegations. It's actually extremely rare. But for a circumstance where there's a high likelihood that there's significant time pressure to make a decision in that meeting, if at all possible, it would be preferable to have the written report in advance. That would be my perspective.
I know this is a unique scenario for council, and so take that under advisement. Thank you. All right, we have the correspondence and petitions from, we have the Chambers Frasers for 2017 financial statements for the Community Development Corporation on page 57. Can I have a motion, please? There's one actually on page 57. Can I have someone approve that, please? Councillor Funk, second by Councillor Penner. Any discussion?
Of financial statements.
You got it. We've all seen these before. Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have the 2017 financial statements from the Jacob Library, and that's on page 64. There's a motion to approve that as well. Can I have someone move that, please? Councillor Seaman, second by Councillor Penner. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. On page 75, you have the federal gas tax revenue expenditure report. Can I have a motion, please? There's one written on that sheet. Councillor Fair, second by Councillor Funk. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried.